Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first in a hopeful series of where I interview each high-ranking MOA Monarchist of America member here. My name is Constantine, and tonight I am interviewing John Arnus in regards to several topics, and hopefully this is going to be the start of a more serious, nuanced discussion on the state of the country and everything like that. So without further ado, John, would you like to give an introduction here?
Yeah, I'm John Arnus. I am the current leader of MOA, so the chancellor of the Monarchists of America. We're a community right now based out of Discord, and we're a little community. I would call us a community right now, and yeah, happy to be here.
Alrighty, so first question, talking about home states, I'm from Michigan. Michigan's got a lot of its
Yep.
own problems, and you're from Louisiana, right?
That is correct.
Alrighty, what is it really like down there? Because I've heard stories up here because there's a lot of
Mm,
people from Louisiana in my town specifically. Like
yeah.
you would not believe like some of the stories I've heard. So yeah, what's it really like down there?
Well, at least from where I was born and raised, it's not that different than any other southern state, really, at least in the north, but there is a few drops of culture here and there. As far as like you have more spices, you have various things. So even up in the north, so I'm in the
Oh,
I'm in the boot of
I gotcha. So like the
Louisiana.
Baton Rouge, New Orleans area.
No, I'm in the top of the boot. It's all a boot.
Oh, okay, I
Yeah.
got.
I like yeah, it's a lot more. I would say it's a lot closer to Mississippi or like East Texas more so. But there
Then
are
again, I've
drops
heard a
here
lot
and
of things
there.
about Mississippi too. So
Yeah, Mississippi is probably what you would call the less developed Louisiana or something along those lines because
yeah,
of
I can only imagine because I got a buddy from Mississippi, and he says like out in the boonies out there, it's kind of fun, in
yeah.
fun
I
in the
mean,
derogatory way.
yeah, it's more down and out than we are. Usually, we are for like certain things economically speaking, we are usually right in front of Mississippi. Um, but
Yeah, but not far in front is what I
yeah,
generally consider. Like Louisiana is generally a part of the poor part of this country. Really, it's a shame
uh,
because it wasn't always that way.
yeah. Um, Louisiana has a very long history, and I would dare say uh, one of the more unique histories in America. Much like Alaska or some other states that people tend to overlook, but we are very integral, just like the various states in the union. We like it. There are a lot of ways you can look at it. Louisiana is uh, not doing the best economically. It's not the worst. It's not the best. I never had to. I never had. I was never homeless. We were never dirt poor. We were probably lower middle class. So
Ah, yeah. So similar to how I grew up.
yes. So we. I never personally had to worry about a whole lot. But I do know that there are a lot of people in Louisiana that do suffer, probably in bigger cities or in more rural towns that aren't supported, much like certain areas of uh, Virginia and West Virginia, and just forgotten.
Yeah, like
A lot of rural areas are forgotten. Yeah,
yeah,
as
like
far
a lot of
as
a lot of the
yeah,
rural
what's
areas
up?
here are also pretty forgotten too. Like, and a
Yeah.
lot of the urban areas, funnily enough, are also fairly forgotten. Like, like a certain city that starts with an F up here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the one with the bad walk. Anywho, that's a different topic. But like,
Yeah.
I hear a lot of things about drunk driving in particular. Is that as bad as they say it is down there? Like, does that happen more often than one could think?
Well, you got to understand that I was born here, so I don't really have a baseline to compare. But I
Oh,
mean,
sure.
I've heard stories about drunk drivers. I've probably seen them on the news a few times, but it's not a real daily issue. I think it might be the highest. If it's not the highest, then it might be up there, but it's not too far up there, I would imagine. I don't have any hard numbers for it, but it's never been a
Yeah, I
problem.
don't expect comment like I don't expect like numbers or anything. This is more of like a sit down casual thing. So like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's all
Yeah.
good. Like I get what you mean.
We do have a history with the age of alcohol consumption.
Oh,
We did
really?
try and
I don't know much
yeah.
about that because I know
So
Reagan up
as
to 21 in the 80s, which
yeah,
really not the smartest idea. But
yeah, it was based off like I believe traffic accidents. I actually did a college paper on this. Like Congress passed it at one point, and it made it like it gave them the right to withhold like traffic funding, so street funding, if you did not lower the age or increase the age of alcohol consumption.
oh, that's
Yeah,
that's interesting, huh?
in Louisiana, it was. I think we were one of the last to uh, move to 21. So our streets suffered, and that's usually what you hear people talking about, at least in surrounding states. Uh,
The roads.
yeah, the roads. The
I know
roads are
that
more
feeling.
underdeveloped.
I know
In
that
fact,
feeling.
that's more of a thing than just drunk driving.
Is that the roads also suck?
Yeah, yeah, the roads are pretty bad here. And that, well, like I said a few times before, it's just the way I've always known it. So,
Yeah, it's the way it's always been, right?
hmm
Also, what about the bayou? I've heard stories on the bayou, like a lot of like cool like adventure stories. Like like
yeah,
they air some TV up here, like cops down there, but like there's
yeah.
never really been like an native like the experiences you've had, for example.
I would what I would liken it with is looking at Alaska and thinking it's all going to be ice or something like that, or
Oh, except
going to California and thinking it's all going to be desert, or going to um, and it's not implicit, but a lot of the times people grab like the bayou, which is in certain areas, Louisiana is below sea level, so anytime you get around water, you're going to deal with a bayou type. So there are kind of bayous spread across Louisiana in a way, um, surrounding lakes. I don't think bayou would be a good word, but swampy regions, what would be considered kind of
oh,
quote
like
unquote the
wetlands.
bayou. Yeah. Um,
Sure.
so you usually find stuff like that around lakes, and even up here, even up in the north, you'll find uh, mostly temperate forests. It's not anything too out of the ordinary for the rest of the country. It's just when you get around lakes, around rivers, it tends to get a little bit more. It reacts a little differently, I suppose, because we are below sea level here.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm familiar with the whole lake thing because there's lakes everywhere in my state too.
Hmm.
It's like everywhere.
Yeah,
Anyway, so on to the next point of thing here. Like, there are a lot of Catholics in Louisiana. I'm assuming with the whole Acadian thing that happened centuries ago, there'd be a lot of Catholics with immigration and
yeah.
everything too.
Um, there is, and it's when I said about Louisiana, North Louisiana being kind of the top of the boot, being kind of more akin to other states in the South than the South is. That's going to carry over to um, religion. So with religion in the North, it's about well over 50% Protestant, probably dominated by Southern Baptists. We're in the
Well,
Bible
yeah, I'm
Belt right
assuming with the Bible Belt and everything, like I'm
Yeah,
assuming lots of Baptists specifically, and it is hard to in this country specifically to find a region that isn't overly Protestant.
yeah,
So
and
unsurprising.
I kind of have a double a double thing being a Catholic and being an Eastern Catholic. It's
Yeah, that was
very
my
difficult
question.
to
How
find
hard
a.
is it to find a church?
Well, my church is about uh well over 2 hours away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm
So
guessing
it
major city.
yeah it can get rough.
Yeah,
So
no, I think the nearest Eastern Catholic Church for me is like, want to say it's a good 30-40 minute drive. I want to
yeah
say, hold
it's
on to this.
yeah it's in the north. Eastern Catholicism is a lot more prevalent, and you'll be able to find churches, especially in Pennsylvania. But the Northeast is a lot more kind of filled. That's what we call, at least in Eastern communities, as the old country, and that's kind
Yeah,
of
no,
where.
seriously, the nearest Byzantine Catholic Church to me is like 20 miles away, so that's not bad. I
Yeah,
thought it
that's
was going
not
to be
bad.
worse. I thought it was going to be in either Flint or Detroit, honestly.
Yeah. But yeah, like religiously speaking, as far as like baseline Catholic stuff go, we're rare as just being a Catholic is pretty rare up here. But then being an Eastern Christian up here is being
Yeah, no,
a
that's
lot
like
more.
unheard of almost, right?
Yeah, and it kind of increases the relationship one has with Orthodox up here. So I'm pretty close with the Orthodox up here and around.
Yeah, and
So
I'm sure
yeah, that's kind of the
Orthodox
religious
Christians aren't very
situation.
common either.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's like they're compared to Eastern Catholics, they are pretty populous in America, but really speaking, they're small as well. I think they barely surpass like
Yeah, I
two
think it's
million.
maybe like 1% of the population or something like that.
Yeah,
Maybe. And
last
assume
I
most of
recall.
them are either Russian or Ukrainian.
Uh,
Oh no, Russian and Greek, not
yeah,
Ukrainian.
Russian,
Greek.
Greek. I would say
And then various other Balkanites.
I would probably divide it up between like Greeks and Slavs, or Greeks,
Mhm.
Antiochians, so Arabs and Slavs, and those are the three big groups in America
Yeah,
as far as like Orthodox go. And that kind of carries over to the Eastern Catholic side because you have the Ukrainian Catholic Church, the Melkite Catholic Church, various, and the Ruthenian Catholic Church, which is Slav and not Greek but Arab. So
right.
we at least in America, there are like maybe 500,000 Byzantine or Eastern Catholics in general, not kind of looking at, you know. So,
Right.
yeah.
I would ask you for a source on that, but this is more again of a casual I'm not going to ask
Yeah,
for.
that's
And honestly,
at
that's
least
probably
from
a fair estimate anyway.
that might be, but yeah, of course, I'm kind of looking at all of the Eastern churches. I think the number is for the Byzantine side is last I checked, it was like 52,000 or something like that. I don't know. But
Uh
I think the main point is there's not a lot of us in America, let alone Louisiana. So that's the main
yeah.
point. Yeah, the only church we have here is a church in New Orleans, which is a missionary church. So we're not the biggest group over here.
I can
I guess
imagine. Yeah.
I guess I've
I
kind of
know.
gotten used to it being like a monarchist and being a Byzantine Catholic. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, no, that's like two minor like you're basically a super minority in American politics.
yes,
So
both
speaking of American
religiously
politics,
and politically, yeah.
yeah. So what exactly is your ideology like? Like I
Okay.
know you fairly well on a personal level, and I know your ideology fairly well, but for the public's knowledge.
I would take a drink here. Okay.
Yeah, I should probably do that too.
If I usually tell people, like if I'm in a general conversation with people and they ask me, okay, what's your ideology? If I had two words, I'd probably say constitutional monarchist. But um, the people that are watching this, the regular listeners, are going to hear that and they're going to be like, okay. But when you look into the ideas or the groups within monarchism, like
Mhm.
MOA, I would
Yeah.
be more designated as a semi-constitutional monarchist. But it just talking to people on the street and they ask me what my political stance is, I always say, constitutional monarchist, old conservative, paleo-conservative, and there is a strain of monarchism within paleoconservatism, which I strongly favor. But there are other regions within, and when I say paleoconservatism, it gets complicated because I don't agree with everything they say.
Mhm.
Um,
It's like saying you're a
Certain,
neocon and then not liking George Bush, for example.
yeah, there. I believe certain strains of paleoconservatism. I think it goes too hard on, goes hard in general, and on a lot of them anti-Semites, and that's something I cannot stand.
Yeah,
Certain,
anti-Semitism is generally
yeah,
cringe.
certain groups within the paleoconservative umbrella can get pretty anti-Semitic, and I tend to distance myself as far as I can away from them.
Oh yeah, for sure. Completely understandable on that part.
Yeah, I tend to be more kind of in between uh, paleoconservatism and what would probably be considered the thought of the Solidarity Party. So kind of more Christian Democrat, but
Oh,
not
okay. So
really.
like European Christian Democrat?
Not necessarily. More so like the Solidarity Party.
I'm not familiar with them, though. That's why I
They're
asked.
they're essentially like, I would say they're kind of Catholic worker. The Catholic worker, something like
Oh,
that.
okay. Yeah, okay. I gotcha.
So I'm like more, at least economically speaking, I'm so politically speaking, I would probably almost like a Rooseveltian paleo conservative.
Right. I'm assuming you mean Theodore and not
Yeah,
Franklin.
Theodore, yeah. And economically, I'm a distributist.
Hmm.
Um, with a guild distributist is what I usually say.
Ah, okay. I gotcha. So like
Uh,
syndicalism, but not like left.
yeah, um,
It
not
there's
really.
parallels there, but it's not like
Yeah,
the same thing.
yeah. There's certain aspects that overlap between. Sometimes, okay, so it gets a little bit funky because sometimes it's okay for distributists to consider themselves guild socialist, but a lot of them don't want to consider
Oh
themselves
yeah,
that.
connotations with socialism. Mm.
Yeah. So there's a lot of through lines, but the point of distributism isn't to destroy the class structure. Really, it's
Yeah,
to
to destroy
distribute.
the social order.
Yeah, it's to kind of strengthen the social order as great
Hmm.
as they can. I would say my ideal society would be kind of, um, in a way, a resurgence of kind of old American values, the yeoman farmer mixed in with a little bit of aristocracy and
So like the
distributive.
Southern aristocracy, but not blatantly racist.
Yeah, I've always had a great affinity towards the antebellum period, but never liked, obviously,
The
never
slave.
liked the slavery. And I think with our ideology, especially, it's important that we take the bad and cut it out, but we don't want to throw out everything. And
Right, because if you throw out
unfortunately,
everything, you have no basis for.
mhm, that's kind of what happened with monarchy. But in a micro scale, that's what happened with certain wings of aristocracy. They were kind of thrown out wholesale, and I think elements of certain aristocracies around the world are important. Um, but I kind of had an affinity towards that. I've always had really, the old South, not necessarily the bad parts, but kind of the virtue. And I think that
Yeah,
virtue
yeah, gotcha.
was,
So yeah, no, I completely understand you on that. So that actually brings up an interesting point, and I really don't like asking people this, especially from your part of the country, but what's your opinion on like Reconstruction as how Johnson did it as opposed to how Lincoln intended it?
That is a good question.
This is always a fun discussion. So
Um, yeah, it I think it. If I had to guess, I would say Reconstruction under Lincoln would have probably been better. Um, Johnson kind of the initial plan was to give freed blacks and freed slaves.
40 acres and a mule, if I
Yeah,
remember
yeah.
correctly.
Basically giving their own land, allowing them to form communities and stuff like that. But once Johnson came into power, um, instead of being able to form a cohesive Southern society that it should have been, it was kind of cut short. So instead of um, the African Americans taking their place as kind of a melted culture within the
Cohabiting, like
South.
a melting pot, right?
Yeah, a melting pot in the South. It kind of exacerbated uh, segregation and
It
made
made it
that
work.
way worse than it would have been initially because after Johnson you had sharecropping and various things like that. And
I don't remember what
that,
sharecropping is.
okay,
Is
so
that where Northerners came to the South to buy land or something?
there was, as far as sharecropping, okay, and that term in the South is a lot different than other terms for it. So, like co ops, you'll have sharecropping.
Oh, okay.
But sharecropping in the South was explicitly for poor Irish people, for African American freed slaves, um, almost kind of getting them back on the dime in a way. Um, so they offered them after the aristocracy kind of got their land back, basically. Um, they kind of started up sharecropping, and they said, "Hey, you can come work for us, but we're gonna pay for your room and board and stuff like that, but you can come work for us." Basically, they wanted slavery without slavery. So
Oh, yeah. Like that's just I don't remember that ever being brought up in my schooling growing up. So it's
yeah,
good to know these things. And that sounds kind of like it. It doesn't sound like a good system because slavery generally is not a good system.
of course not, and that's
Yeah, no, slavery's bad.
yeah, and explicitly the slavery that was brought over is monstrous and
Oh yeah, chattel slavery specifically is like the worst. Like that is probably the worst you could get.
yeah, um, and it stunted the South fundamentally,
And
which
as well
is
as economically, it definitely
yeah,
ruined it economically.
yeah, and it didn't appear so, but the South's inability to advance was directly due to slavery. And
Which, as unfortunate as it is the that is how it happened.
yeah, and because incentive didn't tell people to industrialize, it didn't tell the South to industrialize, so it just kind of kept doing what it thought was most efficient, and that was slavery. So it
Right.
was unfortunate for the people involved, um, the slaves, the owners, because the owners have blood on their hands now. Hopefully, they found salvation, but it's very
Yeah,
unlikely.
it is kind of hard to find salvation as a slave owner in my eyes, anyway.
Yeah,
As
and of course,
unfortunate as that is.
you can never really know for sure, but the best thing you can do is pray and hope that some of them found
Yeah, because there
something.
truly were some monsters that owned slaves, and those guys were not getting salvation. But
Yeah,
at least, like, there are definitely some people who, because not every slave owner was not inherently awful person, and I use that in air
and a lot
quotes.
of them. And a
That
lot of
depends
them
on how they
inherited,
treat slaves.
and a lot of them inherited that from their
Yeah,
parents.
inherited their plantation farm.
Yeah,
And, like they
yeah,
inherited it. So like
in
some
certain
people,
states, yeah, you could only. This is what happened with Washington. Is he freed his slaves after he died, and I'm pretty sure you can't. In certain states, you can't really free your slaves.
well,
Um,
well, you definitely can today because it's illegal. But at the time,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure.
yeah. Yeah, it was unfortunate the fact that you had a chance to grow up and be a slave owner with through no fault of your own, which
Right.
it can be
Which
said about slavery as itself. You have no control over it, and yeah,
and here's the thing: I'm sure that the people that like grew up to inherit these slaves were worse to their slaves as a whole because they viewed them as an inheritance, a possession, that sort of thing. Like,
yeah, yeah,
not then again, not everybody was awful, but very many people were.
in a way, it's kind of like a twisted version of the monarchist idea. Like instead of being handed a nation, um, that it's your God given, like it's your God ordained responsibility to govern and govern well. It's kind of like a twisted version of that because you're born into a certain thing, you're given an inheritance, and that inheritance is people. And
Yeah,
that
no, that
inherit,
is like when you say it like that, that is really like that really puts it all into perspective. Like that's so screwed up.
yeah. I mean, slavery is, in a way, it's Satan's monarchy, and
That is
that's kind of
definitely
the
the way to
thing.
put it.
Uh, and that's kind of the way the South was for generations and generations, and which is why I think it's truly sad that aristocracy went the way of slavery because one, with aristocracy you have honor, and Europe was full of aristocracy, and a lot of them didn't do the barbaric stuff that people in the South did.
They did other things, but definitely not
Yeah.
on that level. Yes.
Yeah. And there's there can be a whole talk about how that can be solved, but yeah, it yeah, slavery and explicitly the Southern aristocracy was a sad thing that probably shouldn't be totally. Like as far as the aristocracy goes, it shouldn't have been totally destroyed. But if it took slavery with it, then it's for the
It,
best.
oh, yeah, And these are some of the things that I wish were taught in schools today. Like, you know how some schools, especially up here, like in
Yeah.
majority like white, like my town is majority white. It's fun like
Yeah.
and then there's Saginaw, which is about a 20-minute drive from me. There's a lot more diversity over there. So
Yeah.
like there's like differences between what I'm taught in school versus what other people are taught in schools, and I think that goes all across the country. But
Yeah.
this is one of the things that I wish was taught is that, well, yes, slavery was an awful institution and was fundamentally incorrect on a moral and ethical level. That not everybody that owned slaves treated their slaves bad.
That is true. And there is something to be talked about whether or not slavery is, a sin that is in essence unforgivable. So it basically blackens your entire name, which in that case, half the founding fathers have black names,
Yeah.
blackened names, and that's the issue. Uh, it,
Yeah, with the way our education system is right now, it just seems like it's not necessarily liberalizing, but it's becoming an echo chamber, just in
yeah,
general. Not necessarily a political echo chamber, but like it's not going liberal or
yeah,
conservative. It's just becoming an echo chamber about, because the way I grew up, I was told slavery bad, all the generic
Mhm.
stuff, but that also led into a like Like, just me not liking the South as a whole for the whole
Yeah.
slavery thing, which is something I'm still trying to get myself out of.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a big thing.
yeah, no,
Because
slavery was
slavery
definitely
is
a big thing.
deplorable and monstrous and satanic. But it's almost like when you have somebody in a Baptist church. So if you're a Catholic, you might consider Baptist ideology wrong or the Baptist religion wrong. But the people who are just living their lives and trying to be good people within that system or within that cultural experience, you don't necessarily want to condemn them unless they are willingly doing something wrong. And it's almost
Yeah,
like,
for sure. You can't just brand everybody a heretic and say you're going to hell, but
yeah,
there
and
are
kind of
some.
the same thing, because you don't want to blame the kids that were the sons and daughters of the slave owner, the patriarch slave owner, or the wife, or at least if they're just trying to live their lives, you know. You more so want to target and vilify those within that system that knew what they were doing is wrong, knew what they were doing was wrong, and sought to expand it and didn't care. Those are the monsters that you probably need to vilify in history.
Oh, for sure. And again, that brings up another thing. Robert E. Lee, which, as controversial as a thing he is, that's a whole different discussion right there. As
Yeah.
controversial as Robert E. Lee is, you cannot deny that he was a kick-ass general.
Yeah.
Whether it be in the Mexican-American War, which I think he was in, I'm not sure. But he definitely planned good fight, even if he wasn't fighting the good fight.
Yeah, I think the main thing about Robert E. Lee was he was loyal to his state over his nation, which is explicitly why he joined the South.
Yeah, he picked the wrong side.
Yeah, he picked. Yeah,
Now, I'm
he.
not going to say he was a good person because I'm not sure if he owned slaves. I'm pretty sure he did, but that's, again, different discussion. Like,
And I think for each individual slave owner, it's on them to find a way to get over that. I'm not going to say blood guilt, but that kind of inherited guilt, and
guilt, yeah.
that sin that you inherited, not through kind of religious means, but you grew up
Ethical, moral
receiving.
means.
And in a kind of a weird way, it mimics original sin in a way, because you inherit it, and you inherit essentially the owning of another person, which is monstrous in and of itself. And you have to grapple and comes to terms with that you're probably not going to be able to free them within your lifetime. The best thing you can do is
Free them
after that. And that's what George Washington did. That's what Thomas Jefferson tried to do. That's what various people in history tried to do that. And this kind of goes into history being very nuanced, and it's kind of the same thing with certain aspects of aristocracy, regardless of where it was, in Europe, in the South, in the North, in some aspects.
Yeah, with our industrialists and everything. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
definitely
and I'm a conservative. I'm a traditionalist in a sense, but I think you need to take the best of tradition and take the best, but the stuff that worked and the stuff that didn't work, throw out the stuff that didn't work, and perfect the stuff that did. And I think when we're looking at any aristocracy, or we're looking at any system of government like the United States, and in the ideas of monarchists of America and various American monarchists, we want to take the American system, take the stuff that worked, remove the stuff that didn't, and make a better system.
Now, some
And,
people will say that's really like picking and choosing. That's like, I'm trying to think of the word here, but other than picking and choosing, which is the very
yeah,
obvious term for that. What do you say to those people that say like, "Oh, you're just a selective traditionalist, or you're not a real monarchist, quote unquote"? Like, those people that want to overthrow the entire system and replace it with a new
Yeah,
one.
I tell
What do you
you
think?
that number one, it's kind of like it's easy. It's very easy to sit on your traditions, and it's
Mhm.
very easy to kind of say, "Oh well, you know, that's the way monarchy's always been, and that's the way." And we're not really changing anything about the monarch himself, but we are changing various things about how a monarch should be removed, how various things like that should happen. And it's important to kind of see what worked and see what didn't. Now, as far as people who say all or nothing, so we want to overthrow, which is a ticket to getting
Getting on
executed
the
for
watch list,
treason. Yeah,
right?
and it's not gonna work. You know, number one, I would probably say some part of it is immoral, because you're kind of, as your first option, you want to overthrow everything. How many people are going to have to die for your kind of violent overthrow to work? And that's
Right.
kind of when I was very young, and I told my dad, "What are we going to do?" All that stuff. And then my dad told me, "It's just like, okay, you want to see stuff change, and you want to be a tough guy. You want to go out and take back your country. How many people have to die?" And that's
Exactly.
a
Like,
big thing you need to ask yourself, because if it's more than one, if it's more than zero,
yeah. Like,
uh,
I have my ideals for how a monarchy should work, but then again, if people have to die for it, then I don't want it to come through.
and well, I would say, um, innocent people. You know,
Yes, innocent people. If innocent
if you're
people have to
fighting
die.
a, if you're fighting like a civil war or something like that, and you're in a war context, you know, yeah, fight for your country, fight, but this would be fighting against your own country. You know, and I think at least for American monarchists, we need to understand that we're not fighting. We don't want to fight America. It's
We want
very,
to preserve the ideas of Americanism, the American system, the American way of life, even the American dream that worked, as
yeah,
opposed to like for example, our wonderful Congress.
yeah,
Congress itself isn't a terrible system. It
yeah,
works. It just needs to be a little more what's the word I'm looking for? Not obstinate.
yes. I
Because
think, yeah,
for example, for example, this month, a couple weeks ago, 15 rounds of voting for Speaker of the House in the modern day, where it isn't, the antebellum period before the Civil War, is a little insane.
yeah, yeah. It it's kind of something to think about, And for people who say, "Oh, well, you're just picking and choosing," that's what happens. You know, we need to have integrity to say, "Okay, I want monarchism, I want tradition, but how do we make that tradition work in a current day context?"
Yes, how do we reconcile our ideals,
Yeah. How do we
aristocratic
reconcile?
monarchical ideals with the current American system? That's kind of one of the questions that we tackle,
And,
right?
and that's why you have to be smart. It's not because we're picking and choosing on a whim. It's because making an a monarchist America in a monarchist system would take work, ideological work.
All
And
right. Oh, sorry.
yeah,
Finish your sentence.
all right. So yeah, it's not a cop out. We're not just picking and choosing. We're looking into ways to deal with America as a monarchy. But yeah,
And for the final question, because I know I'm running a little short on time here, is
yeah,
for the final question here, judging based upon the entire system of American politic itself, the political art form that is our country, anyways. What is your opinion on the current state of the union? Like the whole, the not the far right inherently, but like the right and the left going at each other like two dogs in a cage.
A part of me genuinely worries about if once I get out and working, I am genuinely worried about the state of this country. You know,
I completely agree.
because it doesn't seem like it's getting any better, and we've seen, you know, political problems like what happened in Congress a week or so ago.
Yes, and we were there for January 6th, remember, right? We were there. Like, we weren't physically there, but we were all together trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah, our parent group was very shaken by.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then, like, we were all trying to figure out what's the best course of action here. How do we react to this? You know, like, because there were some things where, like, oh, that's not very cool. But at the same time, there were people that were honestly just protesting there. It's, again, the dilemma between innocents and the people that stormed the Capitol building.
And I think in history, nuance is very important, just like in modern day things. We need to have nuance in most of the things we do, including looking at things like that, looking at the people within our nation that are of liberal persuasion and people who are on the right of the right,
Yeah, alt-right, new right, whatever label they use.
And
because ultimately it's about a label thing.
Yeah, those who are in that persuasion. We need to have the nuance to delineate who in the left has some decent, opinions, has a head on their shoulders, and aren't going off the deep end. And it seems like on both sides, they're getting more and more
Revolutionary.
rabid and revolutionary on both sides. And that kind of scares me.
Yeah, we can't just have revolutionaries both sides, because it's revolutionary or reactionary revolutionaries, really. It's either...
And that's why I tell people who are, right-wing monarchists who are very traditional, if you are thinking about trying to start a war or trying to start something, and the same way with any on the left or right, you don't want war, especially a civil war.
Right.
It's going to be a bloodbath if it happens.
Yeah, it's going nothing short of a bloodbath. Like, I love telling this story, but I had an ex-girl... John, you remember my ex-girlfriend, right? Not Camilla, but the first one. Yeah, no, she was saying, like, oh, if there's a second civil war, she said it was going to happen in April of last year, actually. I'm pretty sure she's a conspiracy theorist looking back, but... she basically said, like, oh, there's going to be a civil war in April of 22, and I'm going to go fight in it. I'm like... I kind of just went along with it at that point. Like, I was just so done.
Yeah.
And I went along with it. Oh, okay, nice. See ya, whatever. But deep down, I wasn't happening.
Yeah. I, as a person who loves America and doesn't want to see America fall, it alarms me. Because
it alarms me that a teenager, of all people, would say, like, oh, it alarms me the depth of conspiracy theories in this nation as a whole.
Yeah.
Especially among the youth. Because we've got leftists who say, and then we've got rightists who say a different thing. Then we got the centrists who don't really care either way. Like, I think the youth needs to be a little more politically involved, but not in the conspiracy theory direction. Like the sanity. Yeah. We need to get sanity back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because the reason why we're monarchists at the end of the day is because we we crave wisdom. We want a governmental system that puts wisdom first and puts prudence first and puts all of these virtues that are integral to government at the forefront over whining politics, over bickering, over knee-jerk decisions, over all this nonsense. And I
I
guess that
agree.
ties back to monarchy. And, yeah.
Yeah, no. And with that final point, I think it's a good time to let you go.
Yeah.
I believe next week we're going to be having Skyhawk on. I'm not quite sure on that yet. It will be subject to change. If it's not,
Yeah. I'll be sure to
it's
listen in.
yeah, no, seriously. Anyway, yeah, that's the interview done. Any
All
final?
right. As far as final thoughts, I just want to say that, I'm honored to be a part of Monarchist America, and, as long as I can, I love this movement and I love the people in it. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm hopeful, but in spite of what the world is right now, I'm hopeful.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
no,
one
I
of my closing
believe
thoughts.
that we together have a dream of a better America is essentially what's going on.
Yeah.
Anyway, that being said, I believe we'll have Sky on next week for an interview. And that being said, we're done here, and I hope everybody watching has a great rest of their day.
All right.